Welcome back to part two of my discussions with General Hasnain, and we are going to talk about the most important, in my opinion, and most dramatic and impactful event of the 2023 year, which is Hamas's terrorist attacks on Israel on October the 7th, which led to about 1,200 Israelis getting killed. Nearly 900 of them were civilians. About 36 children were also killed in a very brutal fashion. Women were molested and raped. And in retaliation, Israel has unleashed a war which many people are describing as genocidal. It has killed over 21,000 civilians. Nearly 8,000 plus are children, 5 to 6,000 are women. But the entire civilian infrastructure of Gaza has been destroyed. And the impact has been global and geopolitical, as increasingly Israel and the United States have been isolated internationally. So I'm talking to General Atta Hasnain about the tactical and strategic nature of the conflict. So the war has been going on for nearly 84 days now. And how do you assess Israel's response? Has it achieved any advantage? Has it achieved its goals? Is it anywhere near achieving its goals? Some of the Israeli retired generals have come out and said that Israel has already lost the strategic battle and may have some tactical gains, but has strategically already lost the war. What is your assessment, sir?
Thank you for inviting me for this part of the discussion, I think, which is a very relevant one. And you're absolutely right. 2023, this was probably the most relevant event which took place around the year, geopolitically or strategically or anything. Israel mobilized 350,000 troops
Yes.
in a very quick time frame, and waited its time, bided its time before it went in for the ground operations in northern Gaza. I expected that once they have gone in with a tremendous amount of armor, mechanized infantry, um, self-propelled artillery guns and things like that, with drones, air power, complete air superiority, and that they would just walk over this area completely. Despite the fact that this is a hugely built up area, and built up areas are always advantageous to infantrymen or to terrorists or to guerrillas or whatever you want to call the Hamas in this case, right? Um, One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist, as we always know about it. But I've been surprised that the tenacity of Hamas, they've been able to hold on. And Israel has not been able to make those kind of gains. Well, you can get into a built up area. You have to go almost house to house, street to street. That is what exactly has been happening. They have not really been concerned about civilian casualties, which as a doctrine, it makes it that much simpler for an army to fight when you have no restrictions on your head about civilian casualties. The moment if I was in Jaffna and I was fighting there, and I was told that you will not kill a single civilian, I will think 10 times before I fire, and therefore make myself that much more vulnerable. In the case of Israel, that has not been there at all. So the doctrine has dictated that civilian casualties are acceptable, and that too 21,000 of them since the war broke out. So, to my mind, to a great extent, Israel has not achieved its aims, and it's been able to, eliminate portions of the Hamas leadership here and there. Nothing is proven as to who really is in control of Hamas tactically, operationally in the Gaza Strip, etc. Major operational centers they've been able to bust, but and they've been able to capture a lot of people, which have not all been on display, etc. But despite that, Hamas seems to continue to be resisting. Now, this is it looks very strange, and even to any military mind, an experienced military mind, it becomes we start thinking all over again. Uh, is the attack of the conventional army, the larger side, is it going completely wrong? Is it not following the ways that it should be following in a thing like this? Despite having killed so many civilians, despite having taken apart so much of the infrastructure, etc., there seems to be no end coming. And then you realize at the end of it, this is a typically asymmetric war. Asymmetric wars end. This is exactly what's happened in Afghanistan. Right? Of course, the Americans did not go about doing it in the manner in which the Israelis have done it, but it ended in a similar thing. After 21 years, it ended in a similar result.
I mean, Lebanon and Israel too, similar.
Lebanon and Israel, exactly. So asymmetric wars have a tendency always to end this way, or to continue for years this way until someone gets exasperated completely by it. Now, this is the situation that is at the moment. I don't think this war is winnable at all, because if you intend to kill the last terrorist, and this I explained this to people in Kashmir also, if you attempt to try and kill the last terrorist, if you hunt for the last terrorist, you will suffer yourself. You'll have contacts in which you'll find that you will get the negative side of it, and at the end of it, it is the terrorist the smaller side, the one who's following the asymmetric methods, they are the ones who will gain. And that's exactly what's going to happen here, to my mind, at some stage, unless something drastic happens in terms of changing this whole methodology of doing it. There are constraints also. For example, as far as the Israelis are concerned, they haven't used the sea routes too well so far. They could have done much more from that direction. They could have sealed those directions much better. It seems there's no end to the weaponry which the Hamas has got, the ammunition that they have got, the fighters that they have got. There seems to be no end to it. There seems to be a freedom of kind of movement from different directions, which continues to take place. So it's the same situation in Kashmir, which people keep asking, why can't you seal that area? It's a similar thing here. The Israelis, despite the preponderance of manpower and firepower, they have not been able to seal those areas.
I mean, sir, if you look at the mobilization, the Israelis have mobilized one troop for 7 citizens of Gaza. Like the population of Gaza is just 2.2 million, and these guys have 350,000 troops mobilized. Before the war and in the early days of the war, the estimates that the Israelis themselves were giving about Hamas fighters was anywhere between 10 to 20,000 Hamas fighters. And if you assume that all men who have been killed, none of them are civilians, even then you're looking at half the fighting force. But I doubt if Israel has killed that many Hamas fighters. But the very assumption that Hamas is a discrete entity with a finite number of soldiers that need to be killed to destroy the infrastructure, because it's a terrorist organization, because it's a political movement, and because the only infrastructure they seem to have is the underground tunnels, where the Israelis are afraid to literally go in fully, because they are taking heavy casualties. They have lost close to 200 soldiers in the fight there. This assumption that they can destroy Hamas's capabilities are not true. You know, during the global war on terror, experts here were saying that in the early days, Al-Qaeda could strike where it wanted and when it wanted. And then as its capacity was eroded, it would strike when it could and where it could. And that is what is going to happen with Hamas. It's going to be able to strike wherever they get a chance, they're going to strike if they can, and to prolong this battle. And from a strategic perspective, I think Hamas has already won the battle by bringing Palestine back into the agenda of the world. It's now the number one agenda. Dr. Jaishankar goes to meet Lavrov in Moscow, and they are talking about Gaza and the two-state solution. Every head of state, except Netanyahu, nearly every head of state in the world has once again endorsed the two-state solution and the need to create an independent Palestinian state, etc., which was about forgotten with the rise of the Abrahamic Accords, etc. So from a strategic perspective, I see this as a loss. But my question, I mean, I'm building up to this question that when Russia attacked Ukraine, I remember one of my colleagues who was actually in the National Security Council when the Bush administration started advocating inclusion of Ukraine in NATO, etc., who's an expert. And he was predicting that the war is going to be over like in a week or 2 weeks, and Russia would conquer Ukraine. And most experts thought that, right? The same thing. America spends 20 years in Afghanistan, $2 trillion, and the Taliban are back in charge. 2 years have passed. We are coming to the third year of the Russia-Ukraine war, and the amount of territory that Russia has captured has not increased or decreased. And then we see 85 days here in this war. With all the weapons and new technology, has the capacity of the military use of force to have political outcomes and impacts, has that diminished?
Dr. Khan, this is an excellent question, no doubt, and lots of people are examining this, I think, the world over. On the 15th of January, I too have a whole session at the India International Center on Asymmetric Warfare. And I do think this is a subject which has not been sufficiently studied. We tend to study asymmetric wars from little wars here and there which have gone on, but of this nature, as something very large, uh, I don't think many people have really cared to go into it. The ability to create an issue. Hamas, as you very correctly say, Hamas has been able to throw this to the world, something like what Sadat had been able to throw up the whole issue of Sinai to the world in 1973 by simply crossing the Suez Canal and stopping 10 kilometers ahead. He did not even go beyond 10 kilometers when even the opportunities existed. This is exactly what Hamas has been able to do. But I still believe this that we may not fully at this time conclude that Israel has run out of steam. When you say that they have already won the strategic part of it, or they lost the strategic war as such, I don't think Israel has yet run out of steam. It is still going whole hog, and I would say the larger issue may still come up because we don't know what Iran is ultimately up to, because the backing to Hamas has been from Iran. To a great extent, it's been from Hezbollah, although Hezbollah has not stepped in physically at all into this. This whole network of Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, Lebanon,
The Houthis.
the Shia crescent, so to say, which has supported Hamas, not physically as such, but backed them a lot philosophically and otherwise. We still don't know what is the intent that they are looking at. So this war is going to continue for some more time, and I would only pass judgment on it to say that one side has either strategically lost or won. Maybe a couple of months later, when a side has completely run out of steam. I don't think the Israelis have run out of steam still. They still got it in them, and they can still continue fighting it out. This realization that asymmetric wars don't lead to results. Most nations around the world have always got themselves deep into trouble because of not looking at this particular aspect when conflict initiation starts. In this particular case, I think Israel was just thrown into it because they were surprised. The intelligence failures took place. Netanyahu was at the helm, and he forced Israel into it to overcome his own personal issues, etc. Conflict initiation was virtually out of control as far as Israel was concerned. Now it seems to have come under a little greater control. From here onwards, to my mind, one of the things which could happen is an opening up of the front in the north, Hezbollah or someone else opening it up from there. If Iran wants to create more complexities in this entire game, then you may find something or the other happening in the northern front end. Remember, if Hamas has got 10,000 to 20,000 fighters, Hezbollah has got 100,000 of them.
Yeah, and they have
100,000 of them, and it's in physical contact with Iran.
They have 150.
Their capability is much more.
The Israelis killed a general, I think, in Lebanon, an Iranian senior officer recently.
Yes.
One of the things that was surprising, at least for somebody like me, was that the US had to fly in supplies for Israel practically within the first few hours of the Israeli response beginning. And in fact, a lot of people felt that Israel took a few days to respond, and was because it needed supplies from the US. And even yesterday, I think the United States is trying to bypass the Congress and shipping weapons. So from day one, we see that the world's biggest superpower is like literally day to day supplying weapons. Besides providing money and protection, diplomatic protection, it's actually providing ammunition and stuff. Some of the bombs that Israel has used are as old as 1990s. And there's a report that has come out that 50% of the weapons that Israel has used are dumb bombs. These are not guided missiles. So this idea that we are trying very hard to save civilians has already been disproved, at least in the US context. American policymakers are also upset that they're using dumb bombs, but that's because they're running out of munition. The same with Ukraine. Ukraine is also one of the biggest challenges for Ukraine is to get the ammunition to fight. And the Russians seem to have all the weapons. They launched one of their biggest attacks just this week. So this idea that Israel is not going is capable. Israel is not. It is the U.S. which is kind of fighting this war for Israel in a proxy. It's Israeli soldiers, but U.S. weapons, U.S. supplies, U.S. money. So the U.S. can sustain this, for several years, if there is political will to do that. But it could just lead to just a humanitarian disaster, perhaps the biggest one in this century.
Your last part, what you just said, that is something in the making already, as we know. But to answer the first part of your question, it was a very interesting observation that the United States from day one was flying in supplies, reinforcement. Reinforcements means reinforcing material and things like that. Yes, of course, it moved in a full fleet into the Mediterranean, from where they have been actually shooting down various missiles and things like that.
I wanted to add one more thing. The U.S.
Yeah.
I might actually do a show, a small editorial, that the U.S. is already in the war with the Houthis. Day before yesterday, the U.S. fought for 10 hours. I mean, it's not like you're just responding. It's a battle that went on for 10 hours.
Yes. Yeah. No doubt about it. In fact, the Houthi battle on the Red Sea hasn't been spoken of that much so far. Yeah. It needs to be analyzed and looked at much more deeply. But to come back to that initial part of it, you see, the very fact that Israel was taken by surprise in the initial run of the attacks itself just displays that they were not ready mentally at all. And if a nation is not mentally ready, if the leadership is not mentally ready, then it leads to this kind of a thing. You see the lead time that Israel took this time to mobilize 350,000 troops. It took a fairly long time, and then subsequently to launch into battle. We were all the time assessing that Israel is hesitant about going in because they think built-up areas are difficult to tackle. But it was not so. I think most likely they just didn't have the means available with them, and all that stuff was being brought to them by the Americans. There's no doubt about it. And we are all aware that even Pakistan has provided ammunition to Ukraine. So today, countries around the world, and no one is in a position to immediately fight like that. We were in India some years ago, 10 years ago, we were down to 10 days of war wastage rates of ammunition, of our artillery and other ammunitions. It's only later that this whole thing was built up at the behest of General Bikram Singh at that particular time. And I remember Mr. Manohar Parrikar, who took it upon himself to take this issue by the throat and develop this whole capability back again. Otherwise, India was in a very, very sad state around 2013 and 14 when we didn't have that kind of ammunition. So this is a perennial problem with most nations who have not fought wars for some time. It shouldn't happen in the case of Israel because this whole survival depends on this. There's no doubt about it. But having said that, once you're absolutely right, this will just continue. I mean, this aspect of the United States enabling Israel to be able to respond and continue with this war can continue. But one thing which really encouraged me was the visit of the American Defense Secretary to Israel. and his very, very wise words to them, which, amounted to the fact that, not in so many words, saying that they were going wrong in their strategy of indiscriminate bombing, indiscriminate creation of casualties, etc. They had to be more careful, they had to be more surgical in their approach. I don't think there could be better advice than that, because John Austin is known, he has the experience, he has seen it in Iraq, he's seen it in Afghanistan,
Yes.
everywhere. His words of wisdom should be taken very, very seriously by Israel. And I'm sure that these words which have been spoken here will also have a repercussion on the Congress in America, which will also start questioning this. Why is the United States, while speaking on one hand about this whole issue of humanitarianism, why is it supporting Israel in a war in which humanitarianism is the last thing which is there on anyone's mind at the moment?
The US Congress, unfortunately, will probably be the last institution in America which will come to that conclusion.
Come to their head.
Because, I mean, like we say, we have the best politicians that money can buy. And so most of them are sold out. And those who wanted to speak have already spoken, like Bernie Sanders and in the Congress, the progressive wing. But Israel and America have lost the next generation of Americans. Anybody below the age of 30, 35, up to 70% want ceasefire. Now they're completely opposed to Biden's foreign policy. And maybe the Democrats might pay a heavy price in November.
But Dr. Khan, one thing we cannot discount in this, in our discussions, many of us do get taken up by this whole issue of humanitarianism in this war and Israel's approach. But we cannot forget this fact that this war was started by Hamas, right? And that aspect has to be kept in mind.
The thing with that, sir, is that the problem is that history didn't start on October 7th.
Yes.
So there has been 16 years of blockade. And if you are treating somebody for decades as an animal, why would you be surprised if that entity behaves like an animal, right?
Yes.
So that is a challenge.
It's only important for us to just flag this off, that this is not a one-sided thing completely.
Yes, I agree
it was
that
two-sided.
I mean, there would be no war if Hamas had not attacked. But the fact that there is a military occupation that has been going on for decades, and a steady loss of land in the West Bank, and then continuous encroachments of Masjid al-Aqsa by people, don't realize that even the president of the United States, Joe Biden, who calls himself a Zionist, has said that this is the most extremist government that Israel has had ever. And so, I mean, I think what we are watching is perhaps a tragedy of this century, and we are only in the 23rd year of it. But I was looking at the civilians in the entire Kashmir issues. If you go back to 1988 till now, less civilians have been killed in this struggle than in the last 80 days in this Hamas.
And I would qualify that further by saying that most of those civilian casualties have taken place at the hands of the terrorists.
Yes, I agree.
Not at the hands of the Indian army or the other security forces.
In fact, in the Israeli case, it's the other way around. A lot of Israelis who were killed in Israel, out of the 1,200, several of them were through friendly fire, even in Israel. And here also, we find that some of the hostages and have been killed by the Israelis. General Saab, I am very grateful for you for giving me so much time and talking to me about these two critical issues. And I wish you all the best for the coming new year. And I'm looking forward to having a cup of tea with you within a few weeks, inshallah. And thank you very much.
Absolutely. We look forward to your visit to Delhi, and we hope we can meet and definitely take this much beyond in the year to come. Thank you so much, and a Happy New Year to everyone.